Hello there, my name is David Lucas. I am a co-founder of Disability in Jesus and the founder of The Ordinary Office. I've been asked to share some thoughts about what I'd like to see when all this is over. For us, in Disability in Jesus, online church is not a novelty. It isn't something that we've come to because of this crisis. It's something we've been gradually led into over a number of years. What we began to discover was that online is where disabled people gather. Many of our followers have spent years trying to access church in a way that was meaningful and comfortable to them, and have had huge problems. Not just problems of the physical access to a building, but what the Equalities Act would talk of as intellectual access. So things like not being able to hear the speaker in churches where they don't have an operating loop system, um, not having a service in BSL. BSL is a language, it's many people's first language, and English is not their language. So how do we look after them? For people like me, visually impaired people, many visually impaired people have experienced not being able to access information. Orders of service, hymn books, that sort of thing, not available in whatever format it is that that person prefers. Many churches have done things with Braille, and the reality is that less than 2% of blind people read Braille. And as technology improves, that number is going down, not up. So, again, by far the biggest number of people who feel excluded would be people with intellectual disabilities, people who find the type of language that we use around church far too complex and simply don't understand it. So some of the liturgies that we use are too complex. Some of the translations of the Bible that we would prefer to use are too complex. During this time of COVID, those issues have improved significantly. So one of my prayers would be that that continues. Another thing I'd like to see is an awareness of how we talk about different forms of church. One of the things that has hurt many of our followers is to hear online church being talked of as, oh, it's not the same, you know, it isn't as good as the real thing. As I've just mentioned, there are many issues on which the real church has failed disabled people and is still failing disabled people. As a response to that, disabled people have gathered online and created their own thing. To hear it then decried as not as good, in some way less, by a church that has failed them for generations is doubly hurtful. So another prayer of mine would be that we see an end to that. Above all, my prayer would be that we develop a kind of mixed economy of church. How often do we fall into the trap of mission and going out to drag people back to our building, to our space, to our familiar? If I've learned anything in the last few years, it's there is so much going on with the Spirit on the margins. And we would do well, instead of dragging people back to our building, we would do well to go out and be where that stuff is happening. I was talking to a friend this morning, and I was talking about how I'm kind of learning to see our buildings as depots. And any company that's got a depot, that's where their staff gather in the morning, that's where the office is. But then, think of a builder's merchants. So all the guys come into work 7 o'clock in the morning, they all park their cars in the car park. They go into the office, they get their chitty to find out what jobs they're on that day. They load up their vans and they go out to where the job is. So I want to see church built on that model. If we must have a building, let it be a depot, not a hideaway. Thanks for listening.